Hello, and my name is Martin Smith, and I look after all Microsoft Azure at Westcoast. This is the video on how to spin up a virtual machine. So previously we've done a video on the tutorials, and this is the virtual machine. So, fairly easy. All you need to do is go to New in the top left-hand corner, and then you'll have all the wonderful things that you can actually do within Azure itself. So what we want to do is spin up a virtual machine. And you can see it's one of the most popular choices up here. So we're actually going to click the latest and greatest Server 2016 Data Center Edition. And then you can see that it comes up with a list of requests. So, for instance, naturally you want to give a name to your virtual machine. So we're just going to call this one testing, as it's in my test portal. And you'll see a little tick comes up, a little cross comes up. That means you've done something not within the criteria. So they'll ask you to input the other areas. Then you have the VM disk types. Now, you have HDD and SSD. Now, so you have hard drives and then you have solid state drives. Okay, so you just pick your preference on which one you would like. We can go into a bit more detail in a bit about which ones they should be. So then you've got your username. Now, username normally has to be all in lowercase. So you'll put testing and there we go, it's got a little tick. And password. Now you want a fairly strong password naturally. And you'll see that it come up with a cross then. It needs to be, so I take it back a bit. There we go. And it will even tell you what you need to do for your characters. So we're going to have a fairly long password. Why not? Okay, perfect. And then confirm it. There we go, beautiful. Now, you want to leave the subscription as it is, but normally you can use other subscriptions in there. We're using the Azure one, but you can use ones like Visual Studio, etc. If you want to go into a bit more in depth into the virtual machine. Then you can create a resource group. Now, resource groups are great because what you can do is you can have a group of resources, such as virtual machines, backup storage, etc., all in one group. And then you can create a separate resource group and have a different load of virtual machines all set up, and you can keep them separated. So we're going to create a new one. Once again, let's just call it a test. Okay. Then you have your locations. Now, so within this, you can actually run it into the nearest ones to in the UK would be obviously the UK South and UK West. UK South being London, and UK West being Wales. Now you also have the Northern Europe and Western Europe. Northern Europe being Ireland, and Western Europe being the Netherlands. Microsoft designated them, but we're going to do it into a UK South. So what you have at the bottom is you can actually have an option to bring your own license, which is fairly a good thing to do. So if you have an on-premise license, you can actually save apparently up to 40% on actually using your own Windows licensing instead of using the pre-license that's already in the virtual machine. So we're going to say no and run the virtual machine. So what it's going to ask you now is the size. So you have your recommended ones on the front page. Now, it's up to you which one you want to choose. It's got all the specifications, the cores, gigs of RAM, etc. Now, what you do is you can just select basically whichever one you want. You have a D series, and you have also other series, the L's, F's, etc. There's going to be a separate video on what each of these mean. So for now, we're just going to pick the one at the top, and we're going to go with the very top. There we go. We're going to go with the DS1 V2. Why not? So that's one core, 3.5 gig of RAM. And then once you've selected it, hit the button at the bottom. Then you have your settings that come up. Now, again, we're going to go into these in a bit more detail, but basically through all of these, you have like the high availability sets, and it's got all the information on what each of them mean as you go along and start creating. Basically for this one, for an availability set, we're not going to have none because we're not duplicating, we're not doing anything like that. It's going to stay as it is. So from a storage account, so we're going to use a managed disk. Then you have the options then of using the virtual network side. Again, if you're just spinning up a VM in a test environment and things like that, it's always fine just to have a little fiddle around with this sort of areas and mess with this, have a play around with the subnets, the IP addresses, etc. Again, they're all customizable. So if I went into the virtual network, for instance, I can then edit the areas going on into here, the public IPs. Again, you can change those, and the network security settings, etc. As you can see. So what we're going to do is we are going to go down to the bottom. So again, once these have all had an option ticked into them. So the testing NSGs, etc. Once they've all been done, you can all go through to the bottom, and then you've got an auto shutdown option. Now this is actually pretty good and a newer addition to the Azure virtual machines. So I selected on, I can have a time in which they can shut down, and then obviously then you turn them back on again. Now on ours, as it's a test, we're going to keep it off. Again, reboot diagnostics, where you can monitor and make sure everything is okay with the virtual machine, and then you can have an OS diagnostic. So you can, again, you can create alerts and things like that. So what we're going to do is create the diagnostic account. And again, you can actually just create a storage account to actually go on top of it. So what you're going to do is use a pre one, and okay. So as you can see, the most important thing on here is the fact that it's passed its validation. If it's past that, you're already pretty much there. It's got a nice review of exactly what's been spun up and the terms of use and things like that, which some people do ask for quite a lot. And then you just hit the create at the bottom. And then it will begin to deploy. And as if by magic, you can see that the virtual machine has now appeared on our dashboard, the testing virtual machine. So if I click onto that, we can go in and then see it running. We have all the, again, it's not actually programming anything. There's no applications running through it at the moment. But obviously you would see the CPU networking, etc., and the disk operations be all spiking at the bottom in the graphs. And again, you have all the diagnostics that you can do on the virtual machine on the left-hand side. As mentioned previously, you can even upscale and downscale a virtual machine as you go along.